On the night of July 12, 2026, a phone call went out from a home in Washington. Cardiac arrest. Minutes later, one of the most powerful and most argued about men in American politics was gone. Lindsey Graham, a military lawyer, a senator for more than 20 years, a man who once called Donald Trump unfit for office and then became his closest friend. He died just hours after returning from Ukraine, and almost immediately, the questions began. This is the life, the contradictions, and the death of Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Olin Graham was born in 1955 in central South Carolina. His family ran a small bar and pool hall called the Sanitary Cafe, and Lindsey grew up working behind the counter. Then tragedy hit. When he was 21, his mother died. A year later, his father died too. Suddenly, Lindsey was raising his 13-year-old sister on his own. He put himself through the University of South Carolina, earned a law degree, and joined the Air Force as a military lawyer, a JAG officer. He served overseas in Germany as the Air Force's chief prosecutor in Europe and stayed in the reserves for decades, retiring as a colonel. In 1994, he won a seat in the U.S. House. In 2002, he moved up to the Senate. And for the next 23 years, Lindsey Graham was one of the loudest voices in Washington. But he did not rise alone. In the Senate, Graham found a mentor and a best friend, the war hero John McCain. Together with Senator Joe Lieberman, the two traveled the world's hotspots so often that General David Petraeus nicknamed them the Three Amigos. McCain shaped Graham's whole worldview, tough on America's enemies, loyal to its friends. For years, where McCain went, Graham followed. To understand Graham, you have to go back to 2015. Donald Trump was rising, and Lindsey Graham, running for president himself, was one of his fiercest critics. He did not hold back. Graham called Trump, quote, a race-baiting, xenophobic religious bigot. He said, I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office. And in one interview, he put it as bluntly as a senator can. You know how you make America great again? Tell Donald Trump to go to hell. Back then, Graham was seen as the grown-up in the room, the war hawk who put honor and country over party. His own campaign never caught fire, and he dropped out. But those words were on the record, and soon they would come back to haunt him. Then Trump won, and something changed. In March of 2017, the two men who had traded insults sat down for lunch. They started golfing together, more than 100 hours on the course, by some counts. Graham joked that Trump beat him like a drum. The Critic became a champion. He helped push Trump's judges onto the courts, defended him on television, and became part of his inner circle. Supporters said Graham was just being practical, that to get things done, you work with the president you have. Critics said he had traded his principles for access and power. Whatever the reason, the change was total. The man who said go to hell had become one of Trump's most loyal friends. There was one more piece to the story. In August of 2018, John McCain died of brain cancer. Graham was shattered. On the Senate floor, fighting back tears, he called McCain his dearest friend and mentor, and said McCain had taught him that honor and imperfection are always in competition. But McCain had also been a check on Graham, and McCain never made peace with Trump. With his mentor gone, that last counterweight was gone too. To Graham's critics, this was the moment he was fully set free to follow Trump. To Graham, It was simpler. McCain, he said, had taught him that after an election, you have an obligation to help the president move the country forward. Graham's career was full of flashpoints, sharp, quotable lines that thrilled his base and outraged his opponents. During the 2018 Kavanaugh Supreme Court hearings, he turned to the cameras, furious, and called the process the most despicable thing I have seen in my time in politics. On race, he once said that in South Carolina, Black people could go anywhere as long as they were conservative, a comment critics called a denial of systemic racism. His words could also turn brutal toward activists. In 2025, when the young climate activist Greta Thunberg joined an aid boat bound for Gaza, Graham mocked her online. "Hope Greta and her friends can swim." Supporters shrugged it off as trolling. Critics called it a sitting senator, making light of a threat to a young woman's life. And then there was the reversal that followed him for years. In 2016, when a Supreme Court seat opened in an election year, Graham insisted the next president should fill it. "Use my words against me," he said. 4 years later, with the roles reversed, he did the opposite and helped confirm a new justice just weeks before the 2020 election. To his critics, it was the ultimate flip-flop. To his supporters, it was simply hardball, the way both sides play it. On the world stage, Graham was one of Washington's most aggressive voices. He backed the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and for 20 years he pushed for military strength against America's rivals. Iran was his focus. He called for maximum pressure, heavy sanctions, and even the threat of force. When conflict with Iran boiled over in 2026, Graham did not soften. He said that if the Iranian government fell, we are going to have a new Middle East, and we are going to make a ton of money. He spoke about America's enemies the way a general speaks about targets. He urged Washington to strike Iran's oil fields and its Revolutionary Guard bases, saying simply, "Blow it off the map." And his belief in overwhelming force ran deep. Defending Israel's war in Gaza, he reached back to World War II, asking why it had been acceptable for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their war, and telling Israel to do whatever you have to do to survive. To supporters, this was a man who understood that weakness invites danger. To critics, it was a senator too eager for another war, and even some in his own party pushed back. It was a fitting chapter for a lifelong hawk, and it would soon fuel the biggest question of all. On Friday, July 11th, Lindsey Graham was in Kyiv, Ukraine. He met with President Zelensky and pushed for tougher sanctions on Russia. Less than 36 hours later, he was dead. His office called it a brief and sudden illness. Emergency crews responded to a report of cardiac arrest at his Washington home. Now, here is where we have to be careful and separate fact from theory. The facts: Graham was 71. His father died of a heart attack at a young age, and a long, exhausting overseas trip can strain the heart. Doctors say a sudden cardiac event is the most likely explanation, but the timing set the internet on fire. Within hours, some prominent online voices, including figures on the political right, asked whether Graham could have been poisoned, pointing at Russia or even at the Iranian government, given his hard line against both. Let us be clear. There is no evidence of foul play, and no official has suggested it. These claims are conjecture, theories born from suspicion and timing, not proof. But in a country this divided, a sudden death is rarely treated as just a sudden death. So what happens now? Graham's Senate seat is suddenly empty, and in a closely divided Senate, one seat matters. Under South Carolina law, the Republican governor, Henry McMaster, can name a temporary replacement to serve right away. Then the voters decide, in a special election with the first round set for August. For Republicans, it is a scramble and a test. Graham was a bridge between the old party of John McCain and the new party of Donald Trump. With him gone, that bridge is weaker. Graham was, in fact, the last of the three amigos, McCain, Lieberman, and Graham, now all gone. The seat is safely Republican, but the fight to fill it could pull the party even further toward Trump. And beyond the politics, an era ends. For better or worse, Lindsey Graham helped shape a generation of American foreign policy and courts. Love him or hate him, and people did both, Washington will not be the same without him. Lindsey Graham was a bundle of contradictions, a champion of the military and a political survivor, a man who spoke his mind and then changed it. We have laid out the facts as we know them, the record, the words, and the questions that remain. What you make of them is up to you. If this helped you make sense of the man and the moment, subscribe, and we'll keep making sense of the news together.